Python. Python is very popular programming languages nowadays, and there are a few fields where you can maybe already heard of it. It's machine learning, deep learning, and data science. Even in, for example, what I know in the bioinformatics, the most popular language was R, but even like in this field, the Python gaining more popularity, and the libraries that been previously only in R, they are now implemented in Python, and many people prefer to use Python. Then it's also popular in web development. For example, Django framework. I don't know anything about that, but that's what I read and heard. So it's also used for some web applications. And you can also use Python for some automation or scripting. If you have some routine task or repetitive task that you do on your computer, most probably you could do some scripting or automation and use Python for that. We also, for example, recommend this book, Automate the Boring Stuff with Python, which is freely available on the web, where you can learn not only to program with Python, but also some fun tasks, how to deal with the files and how to automate some boring stuff. So when you decide to use the Python, you also need to decide where to run the code and how to run the code. So you have a different options. For example, if you're planning to use Python in the future, you most probably would like to have the Python running locally on your computer. Just in the case, if you don't have a, for example, internet connection, maybe you need to have it locally. You can just go to the Python website and download the package and install it, or you can, for example, use Anaconda distribution, which is kind of helps you to set up your environment. I use Anaconda and I don't have any complaints so far, so I like it. Then if you are a beginner, maybe you don't want to deal with all that installation and setting up because it might be tricky. You have also opportunity to use some services, so ready-to-use services, for example, Google Colab or Kaggle. We are gonna use Alta Jupyter Hub. So in these kind of services, you don't need to set up anything, you don't need to do anything, you just log in and you can start to do your coding. Then you have several options how to run your code. You can use just plain text file and write your code in a text file, or you can use a different kind of IDE or some development environments which has some nice features, for example, debugging or syntax highlighting. Some examples are Spider, PyCharm, or this Visual Studio Code. We are going to use in this course Jupyter notebooks, which are very good for prototyping and where we can also insert some text, some pictures, and also code. Then what we can do with this installed and set it up Python. So, well, we can use it as a calculator. We can do some additions, subtractions, all the arithmetics that you know. We can do logical operations, less than, bigger than, equal, not equal, and or. There are also built-in functions, for example, printing the statement or the function that outputs the length of the object, the len function, or the function that outputs the sum of the element of the object, like sum function. So in addition to those basic Python features, in this course, we will need to learn Python, how to use certain Python libraries. So the library is basically some sort of a collection of functions and tools that are designed specifically to handle some some certain problem. For example, NumPy library is designed to work with the vectors and NumPy arrays. Matplotlib library designed to help you with the graphing, plotting, and visualization. Pandas library is great when you need to work with files and data, when you want to import your file or you want to do some exploratory data analysis, then Pandas is great for that purpose. And of course, the star of this course is scikit-learn library. We're going to use it all the time. And this is a library for machine learning. This library is very user-friendly or beginner-friendly. It has a lot of tutorials, great explanations, and usually you can find all information you need on the internet about this library. So before I'll go and show you how to use the Jupyter notebooks, I just want to show you the difference between the options I described. I assume that majority of people already know quite a bit about the coding and etc. But if you didn't know, I just want to illustrate the differences. For example, here I have a text file, which is called greetings.py. It's a text file with the Python code. I can open it with the text editor. And inside I have some Python code. What this Python code does, it asks you what is your name and waits until you type your input, your name, and then prints out the greetings and the name. So how can I use this plain file to run the code? So I can use my terminal. And yes, here I will try it. I just type Python because I've already set it up, the Python in my computer. And then I go to my Python file. And as you see, just running this line will initiate the function or the code in the text file. I will write my name here. And here is the output. So that's how you run your Py files from the terminal. Then you have an option to use some IDE, which are fancier than just plain text file. For example, here I have Visual Studio Code. And immediately you can notice a difference because the different words are highlighted with a different color. For example, this green color means this is a comment. The brown color means this is a keyword or some function name, and the strings are red. So it makes easier to write and read the code when your syntax is highlighted. And then you can route your code by just pressing the button. And you can see it's the same output as I would open the separate terminal. Here you also have some features. For example, this one is a debugging tool and also some version control if you're tracking your changes. So it is quite a convenient way to write the code. Okay, so now I wanted to now I wanted to go and show how to use the Jupyter Hub. Okay, so when you first log into the Jupyter Hub, you will be asked to log in with your Alt account. So I already logged in here. And then you will need to choose your server option. So you need to go down and find the machine learning with Python. Well, let me take my. It takes some time to start, so you have to wait. So then you are brought to your notebooks directory. If you are using the Jupyter Hub first time, it's going to be empty, but because it's not my first time, I have a lot of different folders here. I already fetched the first notebook, but because I want to show you how to refetch, I will do this. So let's say you messed up with the notebook and changed something and nothing is working and you want to have a clean version. You want to refetch the notebook. So one way to do it is just to rename it like this. So we renamed our folder. Then we go to assignments. And here I have the released assignments that I can fetch. So I press fetch. I go back and I check my directory and see that there is a fresh copy of this notebook. When you open the notebook, you can see that this is a browse-based development environment, and the notebook is divided to these blocks that you can see highlighted with this blue bar. These blocks are called cells, and there is a two types of the cells in Jupyter notebooks. There are markdown cells where you have a text, and the code cells where you can put the Python code and execute this code. Here you have a panel with the different tools that you can use. Most likely you would like to use, for example, maybe not this list. For example, this one, insert cell above or insert cell below. I use keyboard shortcuts, A or B, for example, like this. Then you can change the cell type. For example, I want to change these to the markdown cells. Then I can go to the cell type, markdown. So now it's a markdown cell. You have a different kind of keyboard shortcuts that you can, I believe, see here. So it's easier just to run if you know these keyboard combinations. Or alternatively, you can use this run button, stop button, run cells, or run all above, run all below. One thing that we will ask you is do not copy and paste cells, because there are some hidden metadata. And if you copy the cells, this will mess up the auto-grading process. So in the notebook, you have these parts with the textual explanation. You need to go through them, try to understand what is there. And then there are going to be some coding tasks or student tasks in the yellow boxes. You will find the description of the tasks, and below they're going to be the cell where you should put your code. Before putting your code, you need to also either comment or delete this raised non-implemented error. For example, I can delete it. Usually we also provide the variable names. And you could do something like this. You can just copy paste these variable names and then write the function. So this student task is asked to create some lists. So because now I don't care about how correct they are, I will just do something like this. So after you complete your coding, you may find also sanity checks. And if there is something wrong with the code, it will throw you assertion error. And here it says that list 1 length is not correct. So then you can go back and fix your code. For example, let's see if this will fix it. Now the length 2 is not correct. Okay. Let's do something like this. Okay, now I passed the sanity checks. So these sanity checks, they are just to catch some major error. For example, the length of the object of the list is not correct, or the data type is wrong, or the shape of the array is not correct, but they are not checking the actual coding solution. So the passing the sanity check doesn't mean that your solution is correct. You will only know if your solution is correct after you got your auto-graded notebook, after you got your feedback. And that is going to be only after deadline passed. So unfortunately, there is no immediate feedback for your coding solution. Because this is a notebook for training, we also provide some answers or some solutions. But in the next notebooks, there are no such solutions. So you will have to solve the coding tasks by yourself. After you will go through all the exercises and the text, then you can go back to assignments and you can submit your notebook. How to know that your notebook is submitted? You will find it under these submitted assignments, and your submission will have a timestamp. So if you will submit the notebook, there should be the timestamp. Few things to know before you submit your notebook. Always rerun it from the beginning to the end. The best way to do it is to go to the kernel, restart, and run all. To make sure that there is no any mix-up with the order of the execution of cells. Sometimes students get a bit mixed up because you can execute the code in the beginning, and then you can execute code in the end, in the middle. So if you go back and forth in your notebook, sometimes the order is not correct, and you will get the incorrect answers or solutions. So you always need to clear your memory from the variables that are stored there and run all the cells from the beginning to the end. Okay, so that's about submitting. And after deadline has passed, I will try to grade them as soon as possible. Usually it takes about 1 day. After deadline passed, you will see the note here, feedback available to view. If you see this kind of note here, then you can click the fetch feedback and you will get your feedback. Now this button is not working. It just stays there. It does nothing. Only if you have a notification here, then it's like a functional button. Okay, so that's about it. Let me check. What is the difference between coding in Google Colab and Jupyter? Well, in principle, none. There is only annoying thing with the Colab is that insertion of the illustrations is not that straightforward as in Jupyter notebooks. For example, in Jupyter notebooks, I can insert some illustrations or some pictures using the HTML Markdown, but I had some trouble doing the same with the Google Colab notebooks. But otherwise, there is no difference. And actually, with the Google Colab, you have access, well, limited access, but still access to the GPU that maybe you want to use. Okay, I was answering about the differences between the Google Colab and Jupyter Hub. Okay. How to continue working on cells after a long time away? Should I run all the cells from the beginning? Yes. The Jupyter Hub disconnects you from the this computing computing nodes after I think 90 minutes of no activity. So if you was doing something in your notebook and you are in the middle and then you left for the break and then you're come back and you're opening your notebook again, you need to like rerun all the cells from the beginning, not from the place where you finished your work, but from the beginning. You can submit your notebooks as many times as you want. The only last one gonna be graded. Commenting. Yes, there is a shortcut. Let me use this one, for example. Okay, for me, it's Command Dash, but I'm using Mac. I'm not sure if it's the same for all computers. So there should be some combination where you can easily comment and comment, but I'm not sure if it's the same for all computers. And yes, all sessions are going to be recorded. There are going to be one session per each round. So today's session is just an introductory, and then one session per each notebook. Okay, so there's one more thing that I want to discuss with you. I'm a bit running out of time, but still. So one thing that I wanted to discuss a bit is how to debug the errors in Jupyter Notebook. So when you're going to be coding, when you're going to be coding, you will almost certainly get a lot of errors, at least if you're a beginner. And that is normal. It's not a reason to be frustrated or panic. That's fine. So unfortunately, Jupyter Notebooks doesn't have very good debugging system. So how to deal with the errors before you go to the Slack and ask for help? First of all, pay attention to the error messages. The error messages sometimes can be helpful. They might seem at first a bit like useless and maybe you don't understand what it's saying, but the more often you try to read them, the more you understand what they are trying to say, where the mistakes are. So there are different types of errors. There is a syntax errors, indentation, name, index type errors. And I will show you a few of them just in a minute. Another thing that you can use is just use print statement. For example, sometimes if I write the function or for loop and I'm not sure what this function does or what are the intermediate results of this function, I just insert this print statement everywhere and check what are the intermediate outputs of the function or the for loop. That sometimes helps you to debug. And of course, Googling. You can just copy paste the error message and Google it, and the first website you will encounter is going to be Stack Overflow, and most probably you'll find the answer to your question there. At least for me, it was really helpful. So I wanted to show you a few examples of the errors. I think I prepared some examples. Okay, so syntax errors. Well, syntax errors are obviously arise when you're making the errors in the syntax. This happens when you are just starting with the Python, you are a beginner, or when you're switching between programming languages. For example, you used to program in one language, then you switched and you just by habit typing the same syntax in the different language. For example, here we use print statement without the parentheses, and the Python just throwing an error, syntax error, missing parentheses. Did you mean print cat? So this is very nice and useful error message. It just give you a suggestion what is the correct code. Sometimes this is not that obvious, and usually you don't have a suggestions how to fix your code. Here we can see that the colon symbol is forgotten, and we need to put it after statements if, elif, else, for, while, or def. And again, Python complains and says that there is a syntax error, invalid syntax. And it actually shows you with this little error in what line there is error. So you can find which line is the problematic. It's very useful when you have a very long code and you are not sure where this error arises from. Then another common error is indentation error, because in Python, spacing matters. For example, if you use some def statement or if statement or for loops, you need to align all these statements with each other. Otherwise, you will have indentation error. Well, this one is very straightforward. You just need to find the line, this which lacking the proper indentation, and fix it. Naming errors. Well, the most common naming error is when you mistype or misspell some variable name. So this is easy to fix. Another naming error, for example, if you are trying to call some library, but you haven't imported it yet. I think I did this mistake in round 0 notebook. One student pointed out that I forgot to write import NumPy library before actually calling the library. So this is also a name error. And very common one, index error. This happens when something with the indexing got wrong. For example, here we have a list with the 3 elements. And if you remember, the indexing in Python starts from 0. So the first string, cat, has index 0. The second string, dog, has index 1. And the last one, red, has index 2. 0, 1, 2. Here we are trying to call for the element with the index 6, which obviously doesn't exist. And the Python complains that list index out of range. This commonly also happens when you're trying to do indexing in the for loops and you messed up for some reason. Here, for example, the reason for the error is because I use this i+1 statement. So if you have the indexing error, just go back to your loop or the function and make sure that all the indexes are in the proper range. Then there are type errors when you're trying to apply some function or some operation to the object of a wrong data type. For example, here you're trying to, actually I'm trying to divide the cat by 2, and it's not a half a cat, it's returning the error because I'm trying to use division on the string object, so it's not correct. One common error is when you're trying to use float numbers as indices, and trying to access some elements, for example, of a list. It will give you an type error. List indices must be integers or slices, not floats. So the indices always should be integers, not floats or any other data types. This is relevant for loops, for loops, while loops, if loops. Another common mistakes when you use range function, usually you use it in the form range of length of some kind of list or array. And if you forget to use the length, then you will get this list object cannot be interpreted as an integer. And another very interesting error that happens more often than I would expect is using the reserved keywords or built-in function names as a variable names. For example, we have this built-in function sum, which sums up the elements of the list and will return you 6 here. So if I assign the integer value to this sum, what I actually is doing is I'm overwriting this built-in function with some variable. So now when I'm trying to call this function, it's not working because now this sum is an integer, it's not a function. So here are just the examples of some keywords that you cannot use as a variable names. The same goes for built-in functions like a print, len, sum. You cannot use them as a variable names. The same goes for the different Python classes names. For example, next round, we're gonna use the class that called, I believe, linear regression. So you cannot call your object, for example, your model, with the same name as the name of the class that you are using. This will override all the properties of this class, and you cannot use it again. So how do you fix this? You need to restart the kernel from here and run all again. Okay, I think I'll leave that out. And yes, I think that's it. So if you have any questions about the Jupyter Hub, please ask now. You can also unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so I see that all questions are answered.